welcome again to Coffee with Keiko. My name is Kyla. I don't think I actually said my name last time. My name is Kyla. I am one of the podcast co-hosts. I'm here with my coffee mug because coffee and Keiko, Coffee with Keiko. This is my stuffed animal well I've had since I was like 7. And then here with me is my co-host Paige. She is a friend who just wants to talk with me and learn about everything whales and wildlife. I am a naturalist in the Pacific Northwest, and so that's kind of the main wildlife that I'm around every day and talking about every day. But we're just here to have a fun conversation and see which fun facts we can dig up for you or dive into for you. That's such a better.
In
Okay.
it's much more fitting.
This is much more fitting. We're not digging up anything.
No,
I mean, I
we're
guess.
not archaeologists.
Hey, gray whales dig up shrimp.
Oh,
Be gray whale, dig up some
I mean,
things.
for gray whale episode, we'll specifically say together.
How you doing, Paige, on this fine, unspecified day?
Fine day. Good. Just been doing a lot of traveling for
Mm,
work. I
mhm.
was just in New Orleans, and then
Hmm.
before that, I was in Oklahoma. Before that, I was in Ohio for a while. I went to the Columbus Zoo,
Hmm.
which was surprisingly a very, very good zoo. Well,
Surprisingly.
it's just like you think zoo, you think of like the National Zoo, and you think of like San Diego as like zoos. Like the Columbus Zoo was like it was up there, high quality zoo. I saw some manatees for the first time ever.
Hmm.
But they are like a manatee rehab little thing, and I see the sea cows eating some lettuce. It was a fun time. A little warm retreat in the little manatee area of Ohio weather, but it was very cool. Learned some things about those sea cows. Gabe left me some questions. We've had a lot of conversations about marine mammals. We learned whales are mammals. There are other mammals that are living in the ocean.
Hmm.
Manatees, dugongs,
Hmm.
the seals, sea lions, all those things. How do
This
they
is
fit
true.
together? What's the puzzle here?
This is such a puzzle. Okay, I love that you saw manatees in Columbus Zoo. One, like if you don't know much about manatees or what a manatee is, they eat seagrass, so that's why they call it a sea cow, because they kind of like look big, they kind of look like a cow, but they live in the water. And manatees are near shore and they're warm weather animals. So they're most like found like around the Everglades of Florida. And during the winter, they kind of have to go into these little rivers and streams to stay warm while it's colder out in the ocean. And in the summer, they kind of spread out. So it is very unique to see manatees in Ohio. That's not where manatees normally are. They're a protected species. They are pretty slow and live at the surface. So one of their major threats and kind of probably why these manatees ended up in rehab is getting hit by boat propellers. When you're driving a boat around murky waters in Florida, it can be really hard to see a manatee. They blend in pretty well. And so, especially moms with calves will just kind of be hanging out, resting right under the surface. And so, since they don't have a dorsal fin, it's sad, but it is understandable, unfortunately, how many of these animals do get hit by propellers. So they are starting like the Everglade tour companies. A lot of them are essentially doing it's
Airboat.
more wind-based, like yeah, air-based boating where they have their propeller mostly out of the water and in a cage. So that they're like pushing the surface of the water to move around instead of actually having the blades underwater where they're more likely to hit something like a manatee. So you wanted to learn more about fun facts about them though, and
Yes.
other marine mammals.
Yes.
Yes.
How,
So
how'd they get there?
yes. So manatees, they are more of like a kind of freshwater and nearshore. They have an offshore relative in the same family. It's called a dugong. So these two species together, along with some other like extinct species, make up a family called the Sirenians. There
Mhm.
was a third species called the Steller's sea cow, named by Wilhelm Steller. He was a European biologist who explored the Pacific Northwest. That's where the sea cow lived. But unfortunately, because they were big and slow moving, they're like a whale-sized manatee. Think of that. They were unfortunately hunted to extinction in the 1800s. But they are a marine mammal, but they're not a whale.
Got it.
And they're not very closely related to whales at all. In our first episode ever, the main question was, are whales fish? Long story short, what we just discussed is whales are mammals, but how mammals evolved, they evolved from a lineage of fishes. And so in that, we talked about a monophyletic group, which is essentially a fancy way of describing a species family tree. So, like with your family tree, you have your mom, your dad, and then you have your siblings. And that's your siblings, your mom and dad. That's one monophyletic group. But you can expand that out. So, if you include your grandma and your grandpa and your aunts and your uncles and your cousins, that is an expanded out monophyletic group to the very fine scale of your individual's families. So we can do that with species and how species are evolutionarily related. You can't accurately describe a monophyletic group that describes all fishes without also including land-based animals, reptiles, birds, and mammals. So within what we call mammals, we have three main groups. We have monotremes. Those are the egg-laying mammals. Those are the more ancient species like the platypus. We also have marsupials. Those are like kangaroos, where they don't give birth to a fully formed baby, but instead their baby continues to form in a very tiny state after being born. And then we have placental mammals. And so those are most of the mammals that everyday people think of, where a baby is essentially very well developed once it is born. And it is born with a placenta. And that placenta essentially, how would you describe a placenta, Paige?
Yeah, it's a big filter that takes mom nutrients to give to baby
Thank you.
without crossing blood.
Excellent. And so if we go into the placental animals, that's where whales, manatees, sea lions live with humans. And in that placental mammal family, there's four main lineages. The first main lineage is essentially a lineage that hosts armadillos and sloths. The second most ancient lineage within that placental mammal is the ones that host elephants and manatees. And then the two sister group, more recent lineages, one is the lineage for primates and rodents, and the other lineage is the one for carnivores and hoofed animals. And so if we go into that fourth lineage, that includes all carnivores and all hoofed animals, that is where we find seals, sea lions, and whales. But they're still fairly distantly related.
Mhm.
So you have like the whole carnivore lineage, and that's where we have all of the cats, all of the dogs, all of the bears. And in that one, that's where seals and sea lions fit. And they are actually most closely related to the bear and weasel family. So they're called sea lions. I think they should be called sea bears,
Bears.
but that's also a different name for a little microscopic thing. And so then we go into hoofed animals. And there's two kind of main branches within the hoofed animals. There's odd-toed hoofed animals. And so think about like a horse. It has one toe, that's its hoof, it's odd-toed. And then we have even-toed hoofed animals. And those are, I think, yeah, camels that have got two, deer, or hippos. Those are all in the even-toed hoofed animals. Hoofed animals, the scientific kind of grouping for those are called ungulate. So it starts with a U, ungulate. And that is where the whales are. So the whale's most closely related land animal like species is the hippo. So whales are in the sister group to hippos.
Hmm.
But that still happened a very, very long time ago.
Hmm.
The hippos and whale common ancestor, they split off to those two sister groups about 55 million years ago. So a long time ago, but that is the closest relative to the whales.
Hmm.
And you compare that to a whales with all the carnivores, right? A whale is equally related to a cat as it is to a dog, as it is to a sea lion. So just because a sea lion is in the ocean doesn't mean it's more related, because
Hmm.
it's in that carnivore family. And so that hoofed animal versus carnivore animal, those diverged 65 million years ago. So that's kind of how we think about relationships with evolutionary
Hmm.
timescales is the farther back in time something was diverged or had a common ancestor, then the like less amount that related. So 55 million years ago, most related to hippos. Next related to the carnivore lineage, 65 million years ago. The next relatedness is to the primate and rodent family, and that common ancestor was about 95 million years ago. The
Mhm.
next relatedness would then be to the elephants and the manatees, and that was about 110 million years ago. So manatees and elephants are much more closely related to each other than a manatee is related to a whale. And humans and whales are more closely related to each other than whales then are to manatees. The marine mammal kind of term doesn't describe a monophyletic group. It's
Mhm.
literally just saying any kind of mammal that happens to live in the sea. And depending on kind of which marine mammal you're looking at, really shows what characteristics that they still have from those common ancestors.
Mhm.
So whales, right now, the modern form we have, it's experienced 55 million years of evolution. But inside their body cavity, they still have little pelvic bones from
Mhm.
where they used to support back legs, since their ancestors had back legs. And when a baby whale is forming in the womb, they actually start to develop those back legs. And then through that developmental process, which is anywhere between 11 months to 18 months, essentially those cells that start to form into the back legs, apoptosis or the cell death, systematically kills them off. So by the time that the whale is born, it doesn't have back legs anymore. They
Mhm.
also have a multi-chambered stomach, like a cow.
But they don't like chew cud,
They don't.
like
They don't. Yeah.
happen to have stomach. Because they're
Yes.
eating something very different.
Exactly. Yeah. The whales are all predators.
Mhm.
Even a baleen whale is a predator because it's eating fish. Versus manatees and sirenians, those are herbivores because they're eating seagrasses.
Mhm.
So that's another huge difference between the sirenians and the cetaceans. Sirenians are herbivores, cetaceans are predators. We don't
Mhm.
have grass-eating whales. So does that help kind of clear up
Yeah,
the relationships a little bit?
I now understand how different things went into the sea.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah.
But we also we make such interesting observations. Like killer whales are so often compared to wolves,
Mhm.
wolves of the sea, you know. But really, they are closer to the hippopotamus, which is aggressive, but they don't really hunt and have the same social dynamics. But I can see a manatee and an elephant though,
Yeah.
just grazing around.
Yep. But that's also kind of, I guess, unfortunate with their name, right? Is killer whales being called the wolves of the sea. They're like one of the things that I thought when I was in high school was that dolphins came from wolves and like humpback whales came from cows. And it's just like
Yeah.
that's not true. The dolphin is a whale, and all whales came from the hoofed animals. That includes cows. And a manatee is not a cow at all.
Nope.
They're not nearly closely related to cows. They should be called sea elephants, right?
Yeah.
To actually really describe that evolutionary relationship.
But also, I mean, they get the names because of behavior. I'm sure we learned a lot of these things after we started doing genetic analysis, and that's what really built these trees. Because before it was off of what the scientists got the vibe off of them. They kind of look like this. They're giving cow, so they're probably
Cow
close.
vibes.
Yeah. So I mean, makes it great that we have this, genetic data that allows us to build these trees more accurately versus going off of vibes. Because you can see how people would get it wrong sometimes.
Definitely. And like, I mean, sea lions, they're called the sea lions because the males of the species get those really thick necks and basically manes that helps protect their neck when they're fighting each other for, they're actually fighting for beach rights, beach access, because if they own a beach during mating season, then essentially they have that harem of females that go with the beach. So it's pretty different from lions, but the land lions, but they both have manes. The males both have manes, and that's kind of where that came from. So it was once again, it was thinking of a land-based animal that already has a name that humans were already familiar with, and slapping that on to a ocean animal that reminds them of that because of their appearance or of their behavior.
Just gonna throw in a fact: sea lions and seals believed brought tuberculosis from the old world to the new world because they can get it from us and then help to bring it over
Hmm.
across the ocean. Everything's tuberculosis. Read the drawing green book. It's great. Speaking of pinnipeds, what if I wanted a picture of a seal? Where could I find one? Kyla?
I have a website. It's called kylasnaturalistphotos.com where I sell prints. So you can actually, oh my gosh, wait, let me show you. Ah, hold please.
Holding.
My website, kylasnaturalistphotos.com, it is partnered with specific labs. And so partnered with MPix Photo Lab. And so it shows some of their key products. And so you can go to the website and you can click wall art, and there are different canvas prints. So like I have this canvas print of a puffin, horn puffin. So they have different canvas print options, and then they have different metal print options, or just general wall print options of varying sizes. And then also photo gifts, so magnets, buttons, mugs. I keep saying I need to get a mug, as well as frames. So you can customize essentially a couple of different colors or types of frames with a mat to go around this to make a really nice gift. And when I was setting up the website, someone in my life who's been helping me with all this, we refer to him as my audio guy, because he likes making sure I have good audio. He was kind of looking through some of my photographer's favorites and was like, I love this photo. And I would just love to have this above my home office computer. And so I got it for him as a gift, and this episode is being released after I'll be giving it to him so I can show you all now. Ta-da! So he really liked that it was just like that kind of surface tension across the rostrum of this orca. So great gifts, also just fun. And on there, the photographer's favorites, there's a couple of different like tabs that you can select. So there is the orca tab that has this photo, as well as one right kind of before in the sequence, and many other orca photos. It's kind of whatever you want. There's family photos, there's baby photos, there's breaching photos, there's landscape photos. But there's also a tab for humpbacks. There's a tab for bears, because I've seen some bears, some birds. I have a lot of bird photos, like that horned puffin one, and then also seals and sea lions and other pinnipeds. So yes, I'm glad you asked, and I'm just super excited to give that to him. So I'm glad I was able to show you.
Yeah.
Isn't it pretty?
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I haven't seen one printed out yet, so well, thank you for educating me and letting me know where I can decorate, educate my surroundings.
Going back to the kind of genetic statement, I guess. Um, it is better. It's really cool that we can draw these evolutionary relationships with the genetics and genetic markers a little bit more accurately than vibes. But that looks like a cow.
Yeah.
But it's still, I mean, there's still so much unknown, and so it's a really dense rabbit hole to dive down if you start looking into any kind of genetic tree relationships. So when I say that a seal and a sea lion, the pinnipeds, their closest land relatives are the bears and the weasels. Bears and weasels are in two separate families. They're not the same one. And so I say the argument is that like it's really hard, it's unknown, it's not certain yet which one they're more closely related to. Like the exact order of the three changes based off of the different evidences that you're looking at. And so one of the things that scientists will do is this idea called parsimony, which is like which evolutionary relationship would take the least amount of change to happen, the least amount of like back and forth, whether it be genetics or anything else. That we see this a lot when you go into the species level as well. So dolphin orcas are in the Delphinidae, the dolphin family, and then we have the 37 other species of dolphins. Which dolphin species are the most closely related to each other? How are they related to each other? And the exact placement on where they are in these more fine scale family trees, there can be a lot of argument and debate and discovery of look what we found based off this genetic marker. These two are actually more closely related than we thought. And
Mhm.
so it's one of those scientific realms that it's always expanding, always room for more discoveries. And kind of you have to go into it with, while we have a pretty good understanding of how these deep set lineages are to each other, the fine scale species level lineage is like, there's some wiggle room. That might change as we learn more and have better genetic studies done and collect more data on these different species. But there's 94 species of whales, and that includes both the baleen whales and toothed whales. And I have
Excluding the 37 dolphins or including the dolphins?
94 species of cetacean. And so that includes
The dolphins.
dolphins, porpoise, everything, like anything that you
Like,
think of as a dolphin or a whale, that is cetacean. Cetacean is the scientific name for whale, and so it's 94 species of that. So of the 94 species of cetacean slash whale, 79 of them are the toothed whale. So we
mm,
have within the whale lineage that evolved from the hippo 55 million years ago. From that common ancestor, we now have the 94 modern day species, and 79 of the modern day species have teeth. 15 of the modern day species have baleen. So that's kind of that's the first like main kind of categorization within all whale is does it have teeth or does it have baleen? And baleen is pretty recent in evolutionary history. It evolved around 23 million years ago. So in the 55 million years that whales have existed in essence, the first more than half of it was all toothed whales. First, the baleen whale, or example of one is the Eocetus, and essentially they had teeth and baleen. The baleen grew in between their teeth, and they started to catch like that smaller and smaller fish species.
mm.
And so baleen whales evolved from toothed whales. So oftentimes I hear people saying baleen whales are the true whales. They are the actual whales. But if you look at the evolutionary history, toothed whales have been around much, much, much longer. They are more, I guess, more the whale because they've been around longer and the baleen whales came from them, right? And there's also a lot less. There's only 15 species of baleen whale. And if you looked at the toothed whales, that's when we have all these different names, where we have pilot whales and sperm whales and belugas and a dolphin and a porpoise. So it's like, what is it? And so within the 79 species of toothed whales, there's a couple of major family groups. So one family group are the sperm whales. That's the family group within the toothed whales. One family group is called the beaked whales. It
Mhm.
kind of looks like a big dolphin. It has like a beak, like a ball-nosed dolphin, but it's its own lineage. And one of the things that they make them really unique is the males in beaked whales have tusks, which is kind of cool.
Oh.
Another lineage is the 38 species of oceanic dolphin. And in that, like I said, includes orcas, any kind of dolphin species that when you say like bottlenose dolphin, common dolphin, dusky dolphin, it ends in dolphin. That's obviously in the dolphin, but also
Mm,
pilot whales, false killer whales, pygmy killer whales. We then also have 5 species of river dolphin.
mhm,
River dolphins are less related to oceanic dolphins than the pilot whales and false killer whales and orcas that are actually in that dolphin family.
mhm,
And the river dolphins, they're also not a monophyletic group. It's not like the 5 species of river dolphins or 5 siblings within that like that parenthood. They're kind of all spread out. They're all more like cousins to each other. And so they're all very uniquely evolved, essentially, to the river that they evolved in. And we
They're far
describe
apart.
them as dolphins exactly because they kind of look like oceanic dolphins in their body form. But we
Mhm.
see that in evolution all the time where things evolve the same body form because it's efficient, not
Yeah.
because they're actually related.
It's because it's giving the vibes.
It's giving the vibes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So river dolphins were called river dolphins because it gave dolphin vibes, but they're
Yeah.
not actually like in that oceanic dolphin species where we get the name from, which is really fascinating. And then we have the Monodontidae family, and that includes it's a one tooth whale,
Mhm.
and it's was named based off of the beluga and the narwhal, because a narwhal has the one tooth coming out of its nose, or its rostrum.
Mhm.
But they are a sister group with the Phocinidae, which are the porpoise. So the seven species of porpoises are most closely related to belugas and narwhals, and those nine species altogether form a monophyletic group. We also see that like evolution doesn't just stop. It's
Mhm.
always continuing. And so once these two like family groups diverged 23 million years ago, they still continue to evolve their different things. So baleen whales perfected their baleen. Over time, the toothed whales, now that they're that separate lineage, they're evolving different things. They evolved echolocation. While baleen whales, they never evolved that trait, so they can't do that.
Mhm.
Another big difference, toothed whales have one blowhole. Baleen whales evolved two. And then toothed whales, they actually lost the sense to smell. After diverging from baleen whales, they lost the olfactory receptors in like their nostril and the olfactory bulb part of their brain, versus baleen whales have maintained that trait. Not as good as their land-based hippo and human
Yeah.
relatives, but they can indeed smell.
Do they use that or do they just still have it?
It
Yeah.
is thought that it could be helpful for finding food, which seems odd because their food is underwater, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, you can't smell underwater when you breathe air. It's not like a fish. So like, how does that work? And it's more about the smells that large bait balls of fish and krill make when they're at the surface. So it's like essentially if there is a bunch of krill, which krill plus fish,
Fish ball.
they're small. And so when they all kind of condense together, that's called a bait ball. Or small forage fish like herring, sardines, smelt species, the little silvery fish that they school, that are known to be a schooling fish when they kind of get all dense together. We call that a bait ball because it's a ball of bait, and all of the different animals that eat those things really take advantage of that, and they almost like work together. So the seals and the sea lions and sharks and whales will actually push that bait ball up to the surface, and so then you have all the seabirds diving down and eating it from the surface, and so this bait ball gets smaller, but it also gets tighter and tighter and tighter because it's trying to get away from the predators, but the
Mhm.
predators have it essentially cornered on all sides. And when you're out in the open ocean, some of these bait balls can get huge. And so the idea is potentially these baleen whales can smell the oils and essentially the chaos from the krill and the fish when a bait ball forms and is at the surface to help them directionally find that bait ball. What's my did you ever go swimming as a kid and have like those like
I ever go
boogie
swimming?
boards?
Yeah.
You know, and you're underwater and you're like pushing the boogie board down, and it's like it's so much more like water resistance.
Buoyant.
That that's kind of what whales have to deal with, especially big baleen whales, is when they go to open their mouth, they have hundreds of gallons of water rushing in, and then they
Mhm.
have to close that mouth again, which is
Mhm.
a huge amount of energy. And so scientists have found, especially for like really, really, really big baleen whales, like blue whales, the largest animal that's ever lived, they can essentially make a decision on whether a bait ball is big enough that it's worth the energy to open and close their mouth around it. So if a bait ball is not big enough, they'll just swim right through it.
They're cost conscious. So like,
Yes.
is it worth the cost of this burger? You know, I'm gonna drive past this Wendy's. It's not worth the cost. I'm gonna go to Five Guys. That's worth the cost. Or whatever.
It was
Food.
a cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Whales are economists at heart.
Yes. We all should be more like the whale.
Well, that answer your questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel more educated.
Well, thank you for joining us for another Coffee with Keiko podcast episode where, today we try to talk about manatees. Maybe we should talk about manatees more. I need to learn more about manatees. But we talked about manatees and how they're related with whales and how different whale species are related to each other. And, you know, that's all cool stuff. Last time we talked about what's in a name. So you were kind of asking me about killer whales since that's a really popular species we see in my waters a lot. So it kind of comes up in conversation a lot, but a little bit about the name killer whale. And then I don't think we've decided about what we're going to talk about next time. So that's a surprise. So tune in next time to find out what we'll be talking about. Feel free to check out kylasnaturalistphotos.com to see more of those prints. And then also in the description, I'll have that linked along with the different social media sites. So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of that. I'm there. You can see my reels and wildlife adventures. And then if you would like more Paige and Kyla content, just can't get enough of us with what we give you here. I do have membership options. So on my Buy Me a Coffee page, which I'll have linked below, you can either just donate to support this work, or you can sign up for a membership where you'll get essentially these episodes a little bit earlier than everyone else, as well as behind the scenes content of, some of our getting hyped up information before and after episodes, and maybe any kind of random in between content that doesn't make the final cut. That's what you'll get for a membership. So follow, subscribe, check us out. See you next time.